Most people who've been studying English for years are still stuck. Not because they're lazy, not because they're not smart, but because nobody ever told them the truth about why their English isn't working at work. Why you freeze, why you blank, why the words are there but they won't come out when it actually matters, and more importantly, what to do about it. I'm going to break this into 3 parts. First, why the gap exists between the English you know and the English you can actually use. Second, the one thing that actually closes that gap. Not apps, not grammar, the actual thing. And third, a practical framework you can use starting today. Stay with me, because the third part is the one most English teachers will never tell you. Let's get into it. Here's something I want you to think about. You've been learning English for years, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe your whole life. You can read a newspaper, you can write an email, you can watch a film without subtitles. But the second your boss turns to you in a meeting and says, "What do you think?" something happens. Your chest tightens, your mind goes to the sentence you want to say, and then somewhere between your brain and your mouth, it disappears. You say something, but it's not what you meant. Or you say nothing at all, and the moment passes. Now here's what most people do at that point. They go home, they open an app, they study more vocabulary, they watch more YouTube videos, and then the exact same thing happens again next week. This is the trap. And I want to explain why this trap exists, because understanding it is the first step to getting out of it. When you were at school, or in any formal education, you were taught English as a subject. Rules, grammar, vocabulary lists, reading comprehension, written exams. And that system works, for what it's designed for. But here's what it was never designed to do. It was never designed to make you comfortable speaking under pressure in a professional environment, because that is a completely different skill. Think about it this way. Imagine you wanted to learn to drive. Someone handed you a textbook about driving, the theory of how a car works, the rules of the road, the mechanics of a gear shift. You study it for a year, you pass a written exam, you know everything about driving, and then someone puts you in a car, in traffic, in the rain, with people honking, and tells you to drive. You'd fall apart. Because reading about driving and actually driving are 2 completely different things. Your English is exactly the same. You know English. But performing English, speaking it in real time, under pressure, with real stakes, that is a separate skill entirely. And the only way to build it is to practice it in conditions that actually feel real. Not on an app, not in a grammar book, in actual conversations, with actual pressure, with someone who can correct you in real time. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, that's exactly what I need, there's a link below this video. Short quiz, 2 minutes. Answer honestly and find out if ESL Whiteboard is the right fit for you. Real teachers, maximum 6 speakers per class. Live corrections every single session. Links below. Right, back to it. Because the next part is where most people are going wrong without even realizing it. Most people, when they hear, you need to practice more speaking, they think, fine, I'll find a language exchange, I'll chat to people online, I'll speak to colleagues more in English. And that's better than nothing. But here's what nobody tells you. Unguided speaking practice doesn't just fail to help, it can actually make things worse. And I want to explain exactly why. Because this is so important. Every time you speak English and make a mistake, and nobody corrects you, your brain records that mistake as correct. You literally wire in the error. Your neural pathways solidify around the wrong version. And then you repeat it, again and again, until it becomes automatic. So now, you're not just making mistakes, you're making the same mistakes faster, more fluently, more confidently. That is not progress. That is the illusion of progress. And this is exactly why people can speak English for 20 years, in their job, every single day, and still make the same basic errors they were making when they started. Because nobody ever corrected them at the moment it mattered. Now, think about what actually changes the outcome. Real-time correction. Not feedback 3 days later. Not a red pen on a written exercise. Not a grammar lesson explaining a rule you already know. Correction in the moment. When the word just came out wrong, and your brain is still warm, still engaged, still in the conversation, and someone stops you and says, "That word, you're using it wrong. Here's the right version. Say it again." That is the difference between someone who improves every single week and someone who stays exactly the same for years. And I want to give you a real example of what this looks like. One of the most common mistakes I hear from professionals, particularly those whose first language is French, Arabic, Spanish, or Portuguese, is mixing up tenses in professional situations. They say, "I work here since 5 years," instead of, "I have worked here for 5 years." They know both tenses exist. They've studied the present perfect. But under pressure, in a meeting, when they're nervous, when they're focused on what they're saying rather than how they're saying it, the wrong version comes out. And if nobody corrects it in that moment, it stays. But if someone stops them right then and says, "I have worked here for 5 years, say it," and they say it, and then the conversation continues, that correction lands. It sticks, because it happened in context, in real time, under real conditions. And when that happens consistently, 3 times a week, every week, something starts to shift. The errors get fewer, the hesitation gets shorter, the gap between what you want to say and what actually comes out starts to close. All right, so you understand the gap. You understand why real-time correction closes it. Here's the third part, the practical framework. And I'm going to be specific, because vague advice is useless. You need 3 things working at the same time: frequency, feedback, and friction. Let's go through each one. Frequency first. Your brain builds speaking fluency the same way your body builds muscle. Not through one long session, through consistent, repeated exposure over time. Think about what happens when you go to the gym once a week for 2 hours versus 4 times a week for 30 minutes. Same total time, completely different result. Because adaptation happens between sessions, not during them. Your muscles don't grow in the gym, they grow in the recovery. Your speaking fluency works exactly the same way. Your brain processes and consolidates what you practice between the sessions, not during them. Which means frequency isn't just about getting more practice time. It's about giving your brain more consolidation cycles. 4 short sessions beats 1 long session every single time. And the practical implication is simple. If you are not speaking English at least 3 times a week, in real conversations, not just consuming content, you are not giving your brain enough cycles to consolidate. Without consolidation, you're just spinning your wheels. You feel busy, you feel like you're doing the work, but the improvement isn't coming fast enough to feel real. And when improvement doesn't feel real, you stop. So frequency is not optional. It's the engine. Now, feedback. There are 3 types. The first is emotional feedback. Good job, your English is improving, keep it up. This feels nice. It means almost nothing. The second is structural feedback. Your vocabulary is strong, but your grammar needs work. More useful, still too vague to act on. The third type, the only type that actually changes your English, is in-the-moment corrective feedback. Someone stops you mid-sentence, points to the specific word or structure, gives you the correct version, makes you say it again, and moves on. That's it. And here's why most learning environments don't give you this. Because it feels uncomfortable. It interrupts the flow. Students don't like being stopped, so teachers stop doing it. But that discomfort, that slight sting of being corrected mid-sentence, that is the feeling of your brain updating. That is what real improvement feels like. If your learning environment is always comfortable, always smooth, always encouraging, never interrupting, I'll be honest with you, you're not improving as fast as you think. The best correction is the one that makes you pause for half a second. Not because pain is the goal, but because that half a second of mild discomfort is what makes the correction stick. Your brain flags it. It pays attention. It doesn't want to make that mistake again. That is how errors get permanently fixed. Now, the third element, friction. This is the most counterintuitive one, and the one most people actively avoid. Most people want a learning environment that feels relaxed, easy, low pressure, and I understand that. Nobody wants to feel embarrassed. But comfortable and easy are not the same thing. What you actually need is an environment that demands something from you, where you cannot hide, where someone asks you a question and you have to respond, now. Not in 30 seconds after you've mentally prepared, now. Where the conversation moves fast enough that you don't have time to pre-plan every sentence. Because that pressure, that is the condition in which real fluency gets built. Your brain, under mild pressure, is forced to access what it already knows faster than it normally would. And every time it does that, every time it reaches for the word under pressure and finds it, that pathway gets stronger, it gets faster, until eventually the pressure stops feeling like pressure, and speaking English in a meeting feels like speaking English in a meeting, not like performing a test you haven't prepared for. That is the shift you're chasing. And the only way to get there is to put yourself in that slightly uncomfortable situation repeatedly until your brain stops treating it as a threat. So those are the three things. Frequency. Speak at minimum 3 times a week. Non-negotiable. Feedback. Get real-time corrections from someone who won't soften the message to protect your feelings. Friction. Put yourself in environments where you have to speak, where silence is not an option. Now here's what I want to address, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, okay, that all makes sense, but where do I actually find this? And this is the real problem. Because if you go looking for an English course, what you find is this. Apps that gamify vocabulary lists, pre-recorded video courses you watch alone on your laptop, large Zoom classes where 50 people sit quietly while a teacher talks for an hour, private one-to-one lessons that cost a fortune and give you no exposure to real conversation with other professionals. None of these give you frequency, feedback, and friction at the same time. Some give you 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky, but all 3 together, in one place, consistently, that's what's been missing. And that is specifically what ESL Whiteboard was built to solve. 3 live speaking classes every single week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. A daily speaking room every evening, so you can practice every single day if you want to. Maximum 6 speakers per class, so you cannot hide. You speak every session. Real-time corrections built into every single class. Interactive self-study materials to reinforce what you covered between sessions. Omar from Egypt said he's genuinely improving, not just feeling like it, actually improving. Eric from China said it doesn't burn you out like a normal English lesson. Serge from Benin called it a valuable and precious tool. And we back it completely. If you show up consistently for a month and don't feel more confident speaking, we'll extend your access. No questions asked. But I want to be straight with you. This is not for everyone. If you're looking for something passive, something you can consume in the background while you do other things, this is not it. This requires you to show up, to speak, to be present. If you're a professional who is serious about closing that gap, take the quiz below. 2 minutes, answer honestly, and find out if you're the right fit. Link is below. And look, even if ESL Whiteboard isn't for you right now, take the framework, frequency, feedback, friction. Find a way to get all 3 into your week, because the gap between the English you know and the English you can use under pressure, that gap is closable. It closes faster than most people think, but only if you're actually speaking. Not studying, speaking. See you in the next one.